you have to meet your buyers where they are. That's the whole name of the game, whether it's B2B or B2C or anything in between. You need to meet your buyers where they are, and events are where buyers are to a certain extent. But once you start to see that mix shift to like 85, 90%, you really start to lose out on the benefits of so many of the other channels that exist out there.
Welcome to Connect to Market. I'm Casey Cheshire. Join us as we learn from marketing leaders who are driving founder-led growth. We're sponsored by Ringmaster, building B2B podcasts and communities to reconnect you with your audience. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Here we go. The pod is about to take off, right? Like the energy is hopping. We're not in the saloon, but we are in the next best thing, which is our offices, getting ready to record a fire pod. I'm excited to introduce our guest today. Who is he, Casey? Enough extrapolation, enough useless words. Tell us who this guy is that you're going to introduce and learn from today. So let me tell you about him. He is a marketing leader, a thought leader. He's in our community. He is a connect to market marketer. He is a GTM engineer and advisor. Really, this is a no fluff kind of guy that we're about to talk to. He's just going to tell us how it is. Tell us how it is. And also, he is hip to the world of AI. So we do not have to feel like we're falling even further behind. Maybe we'll catch up a little bit on this conversation. 3 times Adobe Marketo champion. I never even got that praise from Pardot. So this guy is a wizard of marketing automation. VP of Marketing, Absolute Security, Max Maurier. Welcome to the show.
Casey, thank you so much for having me. I'm stoked to finally be here after watching so many of these with so many great leaders in the past. Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah. Oh, man. So glad you're here and we get to just unpack some things and just learn from each other for a little bit. This is going to be so good. But in order to ask you this first question, I must do this thing. I must put on this giant blue foam finger to ask you this question. Max, tell me, what is the number one thing that marketers need to do in order to connect to their market?
I wish I had a giant blue foam finger of my own to waggle back. I think that the most critical thing for marketers to do is adapt. And, I know a lot of folks might pick out a particular function that they need to learn about or to stay abreast of AI. I think some of that factors in, but I think to adapt is critical to a marketer's tool belt.
Yeah. And as soon as you said that answer, I'm like, yeah, of course. But of course we need to adapt. And I feel like everyone else is saying, of course, but we kind of don't, do we? We tend to get locked in to what worked really well beginning of our careers, even, especially when you get into leadership. Well, this worked back in the day, so I'm a little biased toward this working again. Maybe a totally different marketplace too, but why don't we adapt as much as we should?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's marketing teams in particular, I think are actually equipped to adapt a lot faster than other areas of the org. I mean, if you think about finance teams or sales teams, they have to think in terms of years or quarters, and marketers can turn things around, whether it's strategy or budget shifts in a matter of hours or days, just as a product of some of the channels that we have at our fingertips. So I think that, our long-term success as marketers kind of hinges on our ability to pivot strategies, look at kind of evolving buyer behaviors, figure out, are the forums changing where our buyers engage? Are organizational priorities changing? Is this something we can get ahead of instead of kind of waiting to be directed in a new area? And also obviously shifting market trends and emerging technologies, which is front and center in these last several years. So I think adapting is at the core of a lot of what we need to pay really close attention to as marketers. And we should be some of the best equipped in an org to kind of lead that change, not just respond.
Yeah. So, wow, that's interesting to think about. Not only do we not adapt as much as we should, but maybe we're adapting way more than the rest of the organization, still challenging ourselves to do it more. But you're right. We can change an email strategy right now, or ad campaigns. I mean, maybe are we just like adapting machines sometimes with I'm thinking ads and You can't quite change your display booth at RSA that quickly, but you can certainly change the ad copy.
Yeah, I think a lot of folks, it's inherent in a lot of marketers' kind of approach to their strategies to some extent, but sometimes it gets lost and isn't as intentional as it needs to be,
Mm,
or isn't as proactive. It's more just, okay, this is part of my day today. So, you know, A/B testing is kind of the obvious thing that jumps to mind. Well, that's adapting as part of our strategy, and that's something that so many marketers already know that we need to do is make sure that we test, we measure, and we adapt. But when I look at, some of the key areas where we need to, think outside of tactic specific, adaptation is when we think about our initiative priorities as a marketing team. If we stay ahead of measurement and metrics and understand where our business needs to go, we can get a jump on what types of priorities need to be front and center for us going into a quarter or
yeah.
going into a fiscal year before the rest of the org even realizes that there's something that they need to adapt to, or some new buying group that they need to pay attention to, or some new forum that we need to invest in. In quarter activities, like we have the capacity in most cases as marketing teams to make budget decisions in the middle of a quarter. And while
Yeah.
we don't love to do that. Well, I think a lot of marketers strive to have a longer term, campaign strategy that lasts quarters and years. We have to be able to adapt in the middle of a quarter. I mean, for our industry, we're in the cybersecurity space. Something happens, we can't just say, well, that doesn't fit into our fiscal year plan. We need to figure out what do we pull from where in order to fund, new communication, new messaging, new content, and show how we fit into this narrative that's suddenly developed out of nowhere. There are several other examples too in terms of how we adapt our mix model year over year, making sure that again we stayed on top of technology, on top of our org priorities, making sure that we're where our buyers are, not just where they've been in the past. And also as a manager, team structure and talent is one of those things where, as you assess some of those same needs, you also need to be able to adapt. Even though I think we're inclined to want to dig our heels in and try to maintain status quo in a lot of cases. So, looking for those areas where am I digging in just because it's comfortable status quo versus truly aligned to organizational priorities or trends in the industry.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Instead of trying to protect my kingdom and my 32 full-time hires, maybe I don't need, half of them in one particular team anymore, but now I need the vibe code side to like take. I need to adjust and
That and also, like, it's not a, we need to restructure a whole org. It's what are the skills that those people need to now add to their tool belt? Like, I've had field marketers who are so comfortable just running events, but the current landscape of buyers in cybersecurity for us is not event exclusive. And in nearly every industry, it's not that way. So it's not about, okay, we need to get rid of that thing. It's how do we augment your skill set in order to leverage digital channels, in order to move things from all third party to some things running in house. So a lot of it is just, you know, adding skills to the tool belt for team
okay.
members. And yeah, there are obviously some of those areas where you're missing true experience that you need. If you don't have experience in SEO or SEM, like you probably need to bring in some level of external or new internal experience to help manage that thing. But yeah, being sure that we adapt everything, whether it's our priorities or our mix model or our team structure to get us where we need to go as a business, not always just digging our heels in unless it's clearly going to continue to support the long-term vision.
Man, so much to unpack there. Yeah. Um, but there's a lot, right? So I mean, I've heard org priorities, I've heard team structure, buying behaviors are changing, we're pivoting. Um, is there a first step? Is there a roadmap? How do you like to approach that?
There's a couple things that I tend to recommend to my marketers to pay attention to. So one is really immersing yourself in your company's goals. So not just your goals or the goals that are, either dictated to you or provided to you by a leader or a stakeholder. I often see marketers defer to a sales stakeholder for where they need to focus their effort or their energy.
Okay.
And theoretically, that is, you should be aligned. You should expect that a stakeholder like that knows exactly where you need to focus resources in order for them to develop and close, business. But sometimes, just like with marketers, folks get really comfortable in their status quo and have a hard time reckoning the changing direction of a company with
Mhm.
the way things have worked historically. And so I think it's really critical for marketers to look at the organization's larger objectives, not just their immediate stakeholder or their immediate manager, and gut check, like, is this where we need to go? Say, for example, you're a marketer supporting North America, all channels, all tactics. You're, at a small, mid-sized business, you're supporting this whole region. And the company wants you to focus more on mid-market than SMB. But your sales team is really comfortable in SMB. They might direct you to fund things that are specifically SMB, but you as a marketer can maybe guide them to be better aligned to the org long term and support their long term success, even if in the immediate they feel uncomfortable having to work on something that's more mid market oriented. If you know that the company's direction needs to shift, then you can adapt before your stakeholders and not just be a hanger on to their guidance, but you can actually drive a lot of the strategic behavior you want to see from sellers. And I think this is part of a dynamic shift that I know I've started to see in marketing, that marketing has become more of a voice in the long-term go-to-market strategy of an organization. We're
Yeah.
often aware of trends or changes before other elements of the org and can help raise those alarms or help kind of guide some different clarity or behavior within some of our stakeholders in the past that would have kind of approached it the opposite way.
How are you tooling or skilling up for AI? It's always the question, right? Is that a hire? Is that a find your most, you know,
It's
explorative employee?
For me, it's not a hire because I need everyone to think about it. And there's enough kind of differentiation in the functions, at least within my org, where, a single hire wouldn't really be able to focus on those respective areas. So I expect my leaders within those functions to explore and bring some learnings back to their teams on a fairly regular basis. But organic use of AI in the day to day is one of the best ways to reinforce for folks that aren't organically going out and finding ways to use it on their own, that there are a myriad use cases for this, even in places that seem a little less immediately serviced by AI. So I think we've seen a lot of development in the creative space or the content space. If you're a field marketer or if you're a web team lead, but you're not responsible for creating content as much as delivering it, how do you leverage AI in your day to day versus just, creating new images or developing new content, written content? And so, some of the areas that I like to look at to get their juices flowing are account research and planning. And those aren't necessarily the most fun things to kind of focus in on, but
Sure.
AI is not just, it's not really supposed, in my view, it's not supposed to necessarily be just the fun stuff. It's supposed to be, what are the things that we don't love doing? And how can this help us do those things? So we had a great use case internally with an outbound BDR who was spending, we didn't have a comprehensive account research tool at their disposal. They linked several different LLMs together with some of our internal support from our IT teams to cut their account research time down from like 4 hours per enterprise account down to like 15 minutes. And it makes sense when you think about it. Like, you can ask these models questions about accounts and get way more detail than you'd ever need.
Totally.
But you have to be actively looking for those use cases, not really just stumbling onto them. It's kind of hard as a marketer. The other is planning. And again, this is tying back to adapting. Planning comparing against benchmarks is one of the best use cases for some of my leaders right now to use in their day to day as you hit a planning cycle or a budget conversation. We know that all of our stakeholders think they're marketers. And so we're going to get a million opinions about where we should spend or what we should invest in. And you can ask any of these AI models to cite sources on top of provide you a starting point for mix modeling or industry best practices. And so I always encourage my leaders to look at current mix, compare that against AI generated benchmarks with sources cited, always sources cited, and have a few different variations of that from different models coming into planning discussions, just in case we notice immediately that our mix is out of whack. Or if we think that a stakeholder is going to look at our proposal and say, well, that's wrong, we need to invest 100% of our dollars in this, we can show them several different examples with sources cited about, why we maybe shouldn't approach things that way and why we might want to support it our way. So I think, as you trickle down into day-to-day execution, there are more and more of those use cases that come up. But for me, those are two of the kind of the ideation starting points for my team is here. You guys can use it this way and it'll cut your planning time down dramatically, or it'll cut your account research time down dramatically. Sometimes I think people just have a hard time figuring out how to actually use a tool in their day-to-day. Am I just supposed to open up Gemini or Copilot or chat? Like where do I even start? But these use cases come organically from within the team or from leadership, and it just helps illustrate for the team. This is just the starting point for us on top of all the things we're familiar with, video and content creation and image creation and all of that. So that's how we're kind of sparking the interest today. We don't have dedicated hire for that on the marketing team. We do have like a council that focuses on that at an org level, but within marketing, we expect our managers and our leaders to find these use cases, show them to their teams, and try to get that spark going organically.
Yeah. And across the team, I love that it's an expectation now for your senior leaders to be working with us and messing with it. And then you as a leader can also, lead by demonstrating that you're bringing,
Yes.
I'm bringing it in all the time.
Yeah.
What gets in the way of adapting?
Most of the time, it's whether you have support up your chain to adapt. Just like I want my leaders to adapt, I also need my management to be okay with us adapting. And I'm very fortunate that my entire C-suite, including my own C-level leader, expects that from us and isn't digging heels in trying to maintain a status quo if it's not truly working. So I think that the thing that stands most in the way of marketers being able to adapt to all of those kind of variety of changes is whether their management supports them in doing that. And that's not just saying, yes, that's a great idea. That's giving the team the time to actually adapt and do it correctly, and not just fire from the hip with every possible change, but to have a little bit of time to kind of assess, see if this is sticking, if this is momentary, before you make a pivot or a shift. So I think, the openness of management, the willingness to support and provide that space to adapt are the things that sometimes stand between marketers and being able to make a shift.
Yeah, I can see that just absolutely killing it, right? I mean, if you've got a senior leader just dedicated to a particular marketing channel, even like,
we see it all the time.
Yeah.
We see it all the time. Like I've had, scenarios where when we look, I like to look really high level initially at the mix model of the teams that I join. And often what you see with orgs that have been around for decades versus, 3 or 4 years is that they're heavily rotated into live events. And live events are a critical place to meet buyers. They're absolutely important, especially in our industry, security focused. There are certain industry events where people are on site and you have to meet your buyers where they are. That's the whole name of the game, whether it's B2B or B2C or anything in between. You need to meet your buyers where they are, and events are where buyers are to a certain extent. But once you start to see that mix shift to like 85, 90%, you really start to lose out on the benefits of so many of the other channels that exist out there. So you see it all the time where leaders get really, really attached to a particular tactic, whether it feels more tangible to them or there's an immediate return versus a longer term gain. That's where we as marketers, outside of just adapting, that's where we need to always try to be as informed as possible coming into discussions to make our case to prove that out, not just expect people are going to agree with us because we say so. So that's a little bit of a different kind of how do we prepare for those conversations discussion. But yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to management, digging their heels in versus adapting. And again, that's the same thing as with our marketers on the ground. Like we need to be willing to give ourselves the space and consider alternatives every week.
Yeah, and as you're asking your team to be investigating and learning, what channels do you use? Like where do you get your input from?
So I break things down first by what we own and what we have to go out and kind of sponsor. So the typical like owned versus not concept. Um, and so, we do expect in cybersecurity that events will be a key component of our strategy. But what we do is we have, you know, 8 or 9 roll up tactics in our mix. And within our events buckets, there are different kinds. So we don't just want to bucket it all as one thing. We don't want people to just think we're only doing one kind of program all the time. That's another thing marketers will sometimes fall into is, well, here's our event strategy. It's like, well, let's break it out into the different kinds and the different reasons for running these kinds of programs. But I always, the classic mix that I'm looking at is all of those in-person on the ground programs versus where we can be a lot more specific targeted in digital. So I usually will start with that bifurcation and try to understand, is there a reason why we're only spending 5% of our budget in digital? Sometimes there might be a good reason for that. In most cases, there's probably not. So, but trying to understand before making big changes, first getting a lay of the land, not kicking down the door and saying, well, my best practice is this mix and this mix and this mix. That's what we're going to do. You don't want to break stuff that's working. We had some work done at our house recently. If you just start knocking down walls and ripping wires out, you don't know. You don't know what you're gonna break. So you really want to understand what you're looking at. And as marketers in that analogy, we're the electricians. Like we're supposed to look at all those wires in the wall and try to
Mhm.
understand what's connected and what's not connected. It's not someone else's job to do that for us. I think we need to take the lead there and make those judgment calls and proposals ourselves. But that's our job to try to untangle, try to understand what's working and what's not, and then adjust, not just start ripping things out. So I like to assess that mix first, live versus digital, and then the 5 or 6 key channels within that we have at our disposal, where we might need to add new technology to continue to blend the mix a little bit more, and always try to justify why we want to make that change, not just because the mix looks wrong, but why, in service of what. Tie it to those same organizational objectives, making sure that we're aligned there is really, really important.
Man, where does this go? If you sort of fast forward into the future, what's coming around the bend with this that you're excited to capitalize on?
I think the thing that's most exciting to me about the changes I've seen in marketing over the last decade or so is what I touched on earlier about our voice in go-to-market strategy. Because we're on the ground, we're inundated with industry trends. We're sifting through the noise as much as possible, but also because we tend to have a lot of data access as a team, it can be really overwhelming and confusing. And, it's not just on marketing to create a perfect structure of, data for you to read through as a team. It's on the business to make sure that they want to make data-driven decisions. But sometimes we can be a check and a balance for the direction of a go-to-market strategy. like I was, mentioning before, what segments are we investing in? Do we have the right buyers entering our system? Do we identify, champions adequately on opportunities to look at why things aren't progressing as quickly or as successfully or competitively as they should? Marketing, I think, has historically been a supporting cast member. And I think we're
Yeah.
shifting into an equal voice in the room. And one that, we need to take really seriously and come informed to kind of speak about. So I'm really excited about the presence of marketing in longer term go to market conversations, and recognizing that without these concepts, without this long term investment, it's very difficult for businesses to meet all their objectives, but that it's incumbent on us to be able to explain the strategies that we bring to the table, not just expect businesses to trust us. So I'm really excited that we have a seat at the table that's not kind of pulled back and off to the side. We actually have a seat at these, long-term go-to-market planning discussions at the C level.
I love that you mentioned that we don't just get to expect that businesses trust us, but it seems like we are kind of doing that often. Could you talk about that? Are you
Yeah.
intentionally trying to earn trust?
I think it's always trying to reinforce trust, if it exists already. I've been very thankful and lucky that, the C level that I've had, um, are they expect marketing to be a commanding voice in the room, but we need to be well prepared. We need to be aligned as a marketing team. We don't want to come in and start pulling up random reports in C-level discussions. We want to be incredibly buttoned up going into those conversations, be hyper aware of our role in the larger machine. And also, one of the things that I've talked about, over the course of my career, but that I feel very strongly about is we are we need to understand the finance team just as much as we understand our sales team. I think the
Wow,
more that
yeah.
we understand finance objectives and the financial model of an organization, we don't want to lose our creativity as a marketing team and just become, spreadsheet managers. But if we don't understand the finance piece as, not distinct from the sales piece, but something that generates the sales strategy, basically, it puts us in a much more informed and authoritative position coming in than just a supporting cast member to sales. We want to position ourselves as supporting to the financial objectives of the company, and sales being a part of that. But I think one of the reasons why sometimes companies underinvest in brand or corporate marketing is because sometimes those are things that are less tangible to sellers. And if we just position ourselves as supporting to sales and not supporting to the long-term goal of a company, we can end up only investing in lead gen, pipeline gen programs, and lose some of these things that are longer term investments for your, position in whatever industry you happen to be selling into.
That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, you do not see the, on well, I'm sure you see it, but, like, you're not, it sounds like you're not afraid of the oncoming AI slop tidal wave.
I mean, some of it's really funny, to be honest. I mean, I think there's some really creative marketers out there doing some really cool stuff. Um, you know, I'm not afraid of it because I guess maybe I trust that marketers will try to maintain the human element, and not just turn over the reins completely. I mean, maybe that's just me being a bit of a control freak. I want our team's fingerprints to be on what we do, even if we can make ourselves a lot more efficient in doing it. So I think where we've seen some of that slop, is where there's been too much creativity turned over. And I
Mm.
think that we end up when we see a human in the loop or on the loop versus removed from the loop, uh, that's when we kind of see the most exciting and creative AI involved content versus turning over the reins completely. So I'm not worried about it. I'm very excited to see my peers and see my team and try myself to uncover all the potential use cases, because we're still feeling like there's not really a clear playbook in marketing. If someone has an incredibly clear AI playbook for B2B cybersecurity marketing, I'd love to see it. But I think each industry has certain ways they can leverage it, and each sub team in a marketing org has different ways to leverage it, all the way up through the C level for their particular use cases. So I'm really excited to see the development of an AI stack, not just tools that you buy, but use
Yeah.
cases, just like we've kind of seen the development of, a MarTech stack in the 2010s that kind of became the playbook and then started to get exploded over the last couple of years. So I'm really excited to kind of see where it goes and see where people, raise the alarm about this is just going to be slop. This is just going to be actually a waste of time versus a time benefit. But also enhancing the skills of our marketers, not completely replacing them. That's, I feel that's what I want to see, selfishly, protectively, but also we're trying to market to humans. You need a human, in my view, to still have some sort of fingerprint on that marketing if you want to resonate with a human buyer.
Just having a gauge or pulse of it makes sense. It's good, but it also can be not real.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just that keeping a human involved.
Yeah. And we see this, that same concept, the same struggle is evident everywhere. I know you were at RSA recently, Casey. We
Yeah.
were listening to keynotes, and that discussion about where humans fit into, particularly for cybersecurity, for our industry, is front and center right now. Like,
Oh yeah.
can we just turn over control to some of our most critical security, stack elements? That doesn't seem feasible or safe in a lot of cases. Like, we need someone to understand what is happening, not just turn over the reins completely. And that's one role within an organization. Marketing's another. And I feel like there are a lot of teams that are going to come down to some of those same conclusions, regardless of function, is okay, at least someone needs to understand what's happening here, how we got to the output, even if our touch instead of 100% becomes 10% of that process. So there needs to be a control, I think seems to kind of be the consensus, whether it's marketing, cybersecurity, any subset of any functional use of AI. But I think the benefits are obvious and tangible and real. So we're all in this uncomfortable, how do we strike the balance moment?
Yeah.
But I'm really excited to see the best marketers in the space creatively include it in their process without losing their own, stamp.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you can run to that too quickly, and then what are you even here for? Come on, keep that human element involved. Well, on that note, man, my next question for you is really
Yeah.
like, who are you? Who are you? Like, how do you know these
Sure.
things? Who are you as a human? Can you take me back in time, like little Max days? Did you know you're going to be a marketing leader on podcast, teaching people how to adapt, all this stuff? What was it
Who
like?
am I? You're hitting me with the existential.
Yeah, we're getting existential on a Wednesday afternoon. Let's go.
Thank you. Thank you. A little midweek therapy session. No,
Yeah, please.
I think, first and foremost, now I'm a husband and a father, which is, relatively new over the last few years. But I think as a marketer, so actually before marketing, I worked for about a year as a 911 dispatcher. Um,
Really?
yeah, it was not is not a good fit. I was not the right fit for that role. But it was kind of this natural byproduct of past summer jobs and things that I'd had that were kind of in this dispatcher type of space. But it was probably the most stressful year of my life, and teed me up really well to, I think, be able to kind of navigate some of the uh, priorities, challenges, or difficult conversations that we have
Yeah.
every day as marketers. I think sometimes when I feel myself, my blood pressure going up and my frustration level rising, I'm like, okay, this is not as crazy as someone's life or death day that they're having. Um, so I made a really hard pivot out of that into marketing operations, and just was looking for any entry level role in tech, basically, and stumbled into it. And I think a lot of marketers probably have a similar story where it has nothing to do with whatever you went to school for, what you thought you were going to do, or what your parents thought you were going to do. You just kind of end up here somehow. Um, and those skills then inform who you are as a marketer. Those past experiences inform that. But started out in marketing operations, spent a little bit of time in field marketing as well. That was incredibly interesting to kind of go from being the list uploader automation creator to the person kind of working with that team. And then realized that I really actually did want to go back and stay in that automation space and start to really work my way up. That translated into marketing analytics, just as a proximity thing, C-level looking for reports. Okay, what insights, not just a report, what insights can I start to provide these people? What's my opinion about this? And that then over time turned into like C-level GTM recommendations. And then eventually someone was like, okay, you think you're so smart, let's give you some budget and see if you can actually do something meaningful with it instead of just your opinion about other people's plan. So that's how I kind of got here. And over the last several roles and years, that's expanded into, larger chunks of the marketing teams, BDRs, marketing automation, web teams, field marketing, digital marketing, ABM, all of those kind of sub functions all rolling into one big go to market growth team. So that's kind of how I got where I am. But I do think if I was going to underpin a single through line, it's the analytics piece. For me, that's the thing that's kept me informed, kept me able to adapt, staying ahead of the signals that other folks might see in the org later, that I can kind of get the jump on, not be surprised by. So that's how I got there. But I think that the through line for me has always been the analytics piece.
When did it start? Even at the beginning, you just analytics throughout the whole. I mean, analytics in 911, or did that happen in the list uploading and?
No, that was just a complete pivot away. No, that was, no analytics in 911 at all. That was just wait for a call to come in and just do your best, and try to learn from the people around you. But no, in marketing operations, um, you're exposed to it immediately. I mean, you are the team
Yeah.
that is responsible for creating, curating, managing, keeping accurate, keeping clean so much of the not just marketing data, but the organization's data. And so I think a lot of early stage marketers in that particular role don't necessarily understand how critical it is because you think I'm just a junior team member. I can't be that I can't be that critical to this motion, but those teams absolutely are. And I think if some of those foundational roles, I think web teams are one of those. I think marketing automation teams are one of those teams where if you don't have these foundational infrastructure heavy teams nailed down, then all this work that you build on top of it can crumble really quickly. So I didn't know that it was going to be so important to my own growth and awareness of go to market strategy in a company in those early days. But clearly, that's kind of where it started, was just the exposure to data, the need to do reporting, whether I understood what I was looking at or not, and then realizing that maybe there was some context I could provide as a team in this marketing engine that maybe some of our key stakeholders needed that they didn't have.
That's gotta be if you're gonna have a specialty, like, if you're, like, creating your own, character in a game or something like that, a marketing game, like, analytics as a background seems to be a really strong.
It's a strong one. It's a strong one. It's also, though, I think it's one that a lot of marketers know that they want to they know that they need to know. And you see, you know, everyone has CMOs that want to be analytics first CMOs, but I think being able to get one layer down or two layers down into how that data is created, um, or why it might not be accurate, is one of those things that's really tough for most marketing teams to have exposure to if you don't come from one of those operational backgrounds. Like there's a reason sales leans on sales operations to do so much of their, you know, their planning or their, you know, quota attainment math is, you know, because as a seller, it's not your job always to understand how your CRM functions and automates and stamps. And I think a lot of marketers shouldn't have to be that deep into it. But you know, there's some basics that have served me really well over the years, understanding some of the key object differences in Salesforce. What is a lead versus a contact? Why does sales talk about lead when they mean opportunity? How does a lead get from lead to contact to opportunity? Like these are things that no matter how high up someone goes in an org, there's probably going to be some discussion at some point about where there's a breakdown in a funnel and these objects in Salesforce are all typically related. And so now I'm just showing now I'm showing where my foundation is too much, but
Sure.
you know, it can be really helpful when people start to really dig in and needle to understand where process might break down, or you know, understand some of these kind of system fundamentals, as well as be able to kind of read a report intelligently that someone else has created for you. So I don't want marketing to have to be like a lawyer for itself all the time. The best analytics partnerships that I've seen are when finance teams and RevOps teams want to look at marketing as well, not just say, you guys figure it out, but want to understand how marketing is supposed to fit into their business strategy as a finance team or sales pipeline growth strategy as a sales team, and want to spend some time understanding marketing, not just say, okay, we've got our sales number, finance has our finance number, marketing, you come to the table with your marketing.
Yeah.
And just leave marketing on an island. It can be really daunting for marketers to just show up with their own information with no check or balance or collaboration from those other teams. And fortunately, those are some of those areas where this background can be really helpful in bridging that gap. So it shouldn't be something all marketers have to do. I don't want marketers to all go through the, you know, the hurdles that come with marketing operations experience. But it has been very helpful as, you know, I've started to take on budgets and functions and things that aren't my immediate kind of baseline marketing experience, as I need to assess and try to understand the impact of digital marketing or search strategy versus an event strategy versus direct mail.
Yeah.
Um, Being able to lean on that has been really helpful. And I think my teams probably feel like they're probably better supported for it.
Yeah. I bet they do. Well, I got a bit of a hypothetical question for you
Yeah.
next. If you're ready for it.
You hit me.
Don't
Let's
want
do
to
it.
catch you off guard here. So, okay. Hypothetical question, because Max, I may or may not have a time machine over here in New Hampshire. So you come visit
Only.
me, do the long cross country flight, our
Okay.
customer event, little field marketing activity, and we get some beer and use a time machine. So it's in the backyard covered in tarp, and it's a particular kind of time machine where you go back in time and you get to meet yourself. And you get to meet yourself back in the day, a couple days after graduation, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, right out of school.
Yeah.
You get to go talk to that Max. What do you tell him?
First, Casey, is this like a Calvin and Hobbes style cardboard box that you have back there?
It's more like the Disney time machine movie,
Okay.
you know.
Okay. I
And
see.
also Red Bull is there, and it's almost like Hot Tub Time Machine as well.
Right. That makes sense.
If
Okay.
I had
Good.
one. If I
Yeah.
did have one, that's what it looks like.
Let me get that flight booked. I'll be there.
Eh,
Uh, the thing that I would probably need to hear is that you're not locked into whatever you were just studying. And I think that's, again, I don't think that's unique. I think a lot of folks end up in a completely different place from where they might go to school. And a lot of people, may not go through that same kind of 4-year school thing that I went through at some point here. But I was a history major. So we've gone from, marketing operations eventually back to history major. It was all essays and reports and reading bibliographies. Nothing to do directly with anything that I really do today. So I think it would have been really important for me to hear, or really kind of calming to hear, that what I just did for 4 years isn't going to define my whole career trajectory. Doesn't have to be law or librarian or teacher. It could be any of those things, or marketing, which wasn't even on the radar. Um, but that experience would be invaluable to me in the career. And I think I've thought about this. People have asked, how did you get from history major to, VP of marketing? And I
Yeah.
do think that, one of the things that has had an actual impact as I reflect back on it is the research element, like wanting to support an idea. If I think about, how you write an essay, you need your thesis, you need your supporting points, and then you need to build on top of those points to support your proposal. And that's what I do constantly. I'm constantly having to justify budget or propose a change and support that with educated, content, decision making. Like, how do we support the decisions that we want to make ourselves, or that we want an org to help us make? So it's a very similar structure there. And then the other is just written communication. Um, Even if many of us now use whatever LLMs available to you to create your first draft of an email, uh, having written so much and had to focus that audience on, back at school, it's your teacher, but now it's your manager or your C level, someone who's in an authority position that you need to understand what you're trying to communicate. That has again come in so handy. And I will often spend time with my team where I feel like our tone is off, or we're not supporting our argument well, spending time trying to walk through like how we can do that better. And it's always after the fact where I'm like, wait, this is very familiar to going through iterations of essay writing or research. So
Yeah.
um not a direct line from history to now, but it would have been really nice to hear that all this work was not gonna be for naught, even if it was gonna be in a completely different career path than I ever could have imagined.
Yeah. What like wild changes and everything, but that's had to have made you stronger and I mean, it's almost like you've collected puzzle pieces or like the little Trivial Pursuit, like you got different parts of the marketing, mix that
Yeah.
you've put together so that you have an understanding across the board as you're running teams now.
I think that's true. And I think every single one of my marketing leaders has their own puzzle that looks a little bit different. I've got folks that have been doing it for 3 years. I've got folks that have been doing it for 30, and each of them has their own way they got to where they are, and their own, life experiences that have informed who they are as a marketer. And some of those create good habits and some of them create bad habits. And, everyone's on their own kind of journey to try to optimize their workflow or their style. But yeah, for me, it's a lot of it's been luck. Some of it's been intentional skill set, like the Marketo piece, doubling down on that and making sure that that was something that I could highlight through that growth as part of that operational foundation. Um, but there's no one path to marketing leadership. It doesn't hinge on operations. There are so many ways to get there. I just think that at the core of it, bringing it back, is the ability to adapt to all of these changes, trends, needs, and be able to support your plan in an informed and intelligent way as a marketer.
Dude, mic drop moment. Love it. How do people connect with you? Where do you want them to reach out?
LinkedIn. LinkedIn's the best way. That's where I'm most responsive. So please hit me up there. If you want to chat to, if you're an emerging marketer, if you're someone that's trying to get into marketing or is in marketing but not sure where you want to go, or you feel stuck, I'm always happy to chat to and try to give a perspective or take a look at a resume. Always happy to do that stuff. So please reach out. I'd love to chat.
All right, there it is. Dude, Max, one for the record books right there. This has been great. Thank you so much for coming on here to like spend some time talking about adapting while at the same time talking about analytics and system fundamentals and the things that do need some consistency. This has been an awesome convo.
Thank you so much for having me, Casey. I really appreciate it. And I'm humbled to be in the Connect to Market history books now alongside all those other great marketing leaders. So thank you very much for having me.
Hell yeah, man. For those listening, if you learned something, I freaking know you did, because I literally have 2 pages of notes over here, front and back. Then share this with someone else. 1 person, 2 people, 9,000 would be cool. But even 1 person, like, who needs to hear this? Do you have, and listen, friends don't let friends not adapt to marketing. So if you got a fellow marketing leader out there who's not necessarily adapting, or maybe just send this their way as some good thought leadership. Or maybe for yourself, you're listening to this going, have I been kind of stuck in the 2010s? Maybe priorities have changed. The strategies are pivoting. Give this a listen, man. This has been great. Max, thanks again, man. This has been awesome.
Thanks, Casey. Appreciate it.
All right, everyone. This has been a crazy cool, very exciting episode of the Connect to Market Pod. We will see you all next time. And that wraps up another episode. Thank you for joining. For show notes and other episodes, visit us at connecttomarket.com. Connect to Market is sponsored by Ringmaster, creating podcasts and communities that create relationships, generate revenue, and drive growth.